In 1 Samuel chapter 9, there's a detail that's easy to overlook because it's not explained. Saul is given a special portion of meat, the thigh. Then he eats it and the narrative moves on. But if you ignore this detail, then you might miss what's happening here. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how to roast a leg of lamb so you can enjoy this delicious portion, and then we'll look at why this meal is part of Saul becoming king. In this recipe from Kenji Lopez Alt, we're going to coat the lamb in a paste of garlic, rosemary, and anchovy to increase the lamb's natural meatiness. To a food processor, add 12 cloves of garlic, a quarter cup of fresh rosemary leaves, 6 oil-packed anchovy fillets, some red pepper flakes, and a quarter cup of extra virgin olive oil. Process into a smooth paste, scraping down the bowl as needed. Transfer the paste to a small saucepan and heat on medium heat, stirring frequently until it starts to bubble. Then cook, stirring constantly for 1 minute and transfer to a bowl. Place your leg of lamb on a wire rack on top of a foil-lined baking sheet. This recipe works fine with a boneless leg of lamb, but a bone-in leg will be a little cheaper and it isn't hard to carve. Rub the lamb on all sides with the herb paste, then season with plenty of black pepper and just a little bit of salt. The anchovies are already pretty salty. Place in a 200-degree Fahrenheit oven for 3 to 4 hours, depending on the size of your leg of lamb. Mine was about 6 pounds and took 4 hours. But start checking the temperature at the thickest part of the meat around 2.5 hours so you know how fast it's cooking. You'll want to cook it until the thickest part reaches 125 to 130 Fahrenheit. When it comes up to temp, remove from the oven and cover tightly with foil. Let it rest on the counter for 30 to 90 minutes. 20 minutes before you want to serve, remove the foil and place the lamb in a 500-degree Fahrenheit oven for 6 to 10 minutes to brown and crisp the outside. I forgot to hit record when I started carving, but I'll show you how to carve on the bottom side of the leg. It's really simple. Hold it up by the bone on the shank end where the meat tapers down and just make some slices all the way down to the bone, about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick. Then turn your knife and cut along the bone to remove those slices of meat. Repeat all the way up the leg, then around the opposite side. So in 1 Samuel 9, Saul is being chosen to be king. God points out Saul to the prophet Samuel, and then Samuel invites Saul to come have a meal with him. And this is where we get that strange detail that's easy to overlook about a special piece of meat being given to Saul. The thigh that Saul is served is the portion of the peace offering that's reserved for the priest. We read about this in Leviticus 7. Saul isn't a priest, so why is he given the priest's portion? This should have been Samuel's portion, but he gives it to Saul as a representation of Saul's elevation as the future king. Samuel had previously led the people as a judge and appointed his sons as judges when he grew old. But the people rejected Samuel's sons and demanded a king instead. In a way, Saul is being adopted as Samuel's son as he's chosen to become king. Saul is seated at the head of the table next to Samuel, and he's served the thigh that would have been reserved for Samuel and his sons. Samuel symbolically adopts Saul as he passes the baton of leadership to make Saul king. And we learn this by paying attention to the detail of which piece of meat Saul eats. Like I said, this is an easy detail to ignore. I looked at several commentaries that don't even mention the meat. This is why reading scripture closely is so important. You can't just default to the Sunday school versions of stories that you have in the back of your mind. You need to pay attention to the actual text of scripture. Assume that there are new details for you to notice. Assume that there's something new for you to learn. So what other details in this chapter of 1 Samuel should you be paying attention to? I'll tell you in this video, and I'll show you how to make some delicious cinnamon rolls with a chai frosting.